One of Melbourne's best-known hospitals is under scrutiny at the Royal Commission into Child Sexual Abuse. The Commission has heard that calls made by a victim of sexual abuse at the Royal Children's Hospital were rejected and regarded as a prank. Here's reporter Anne Barker with more. Anne, tell us a little bit more about this victim's evidence.
Ros, we've heard from a woman who's now 46 years old. She's given the code name AWI because she can't be identified. She claims that in 1981 she spent 5 months in the Royal Children's Hospital where she was actually molested by 2 separate workers. She was there for being treated for asthma and claims that she was molested first by a volunteer worker who was around 50 at the time, and another youth worker when she was transferred to another ward who apparently digitally raped her in a cupboard. Now, she's talked about the impact this has had not only on her life, the fact that she's had many episodes where she was suicidal, she's suffered serious depression over the years, that it still haunts her, she still has nightmares, and it's affected her relationships very deeply with her family, her parents, and it stopped her from having intimate relationships with men. But more importantly, she's talked about the problems she had in reporting this abuse. She claims that in about 1985, when she was 16, she finally plucked up the courage to ring the Royal Children's Hospital and spoke to a woman who answered the phone and tried to start telling her what had happened to her a few years earlier, that this woman was very rude and very cold to her, and she lost confidence, so she hung up. But only a few minutes later, this woman, in fact, rang her back on the number she'd called from and said, "Don't you know about caller ID? It's illegal to make calls like this, you're wasting our time." Now, she was obviously shocked at this and regarded it as an indication that her allegations would not be believed. She talked about trying to call someone else at the hospital a few years later again. And finally, in 1997, she emailed the then CEO of the hospital, John DeCampo, but she did have an email back from the hospital management at that time, but she never had a call, she never had a conversation with the hospital, and she never heard, in fact, what was the outcome of any investigation if it had happened. It was only another 5 years later again, in 2002, more than 20 years after the abuse, that she went to Victoria Police and found that, in fact, the man behind the allegations, Harry Puchel, was one of the men who'd abused her in the hospital. He had died and he'd not been charged. He had been stood down from the hospital after her initial allegation a few years earlier, but he'd never been charged and she'd never really been told. And she's just talked very much about the hurt that she suffered as a result of this.
And has the hospital itself responded today, Anne?
Well, at the moment, John DeCampo, who was the CEO of the Royal Children's Hospital at the time, he's now in the witness stand giving evidence. He's only been up for a short time. He's talked about the correspondence that he did have from this woman back in 1997. He was asked, did it not occur to you that you could advise her that she could have gone to the police at the time? He said no, because in fact he went to the police. He did report the issue to the police at the time. He told of how he did terminate the employment of Harry Puchel, the man, one of the 2 men that abused the woman, AWI, but that he agrees that he was never charged, and in fact he never put the allegations to him himself.
And briefly, who else is due to give evidence today, Anne?
Well, in fact, there's only one more witness listed for the hearing, which could well finish today. We're likely to hear more questioning of John DeCampo himself about the practices in place at the Children's Hospital back in the 80s and 90s and why perhaps, or what more could have been done to help this woman. And certainly the next witness, Christine Kilpatrick, is the current CEO. No doubt she'll be talking about what practices are in place now, whether the hospital has improved on its support services for people in this woman's situation, and whether something like this could in fact happen again.
Thanks, Anne.